Nisargadatta and Bhagavan had very, very different personalities. This is something that you learn about with some surprise. I think everyone has an idea that the enlightened person behaves in a particular way. He's kind, considerate, saintly, compassionate, whatever. There's a particular cliched image of what the enlightened person is like. My experience is they're all different from each other. There's no template, there's no stereotype. Each, in his or her own way, is completely different personality, completely different character. They even teach in different ways. Often what they say contradicts what the others say, even though you might accept they're both enlightened. So it's all a bit of a paradox. But if we narrow it down to Ramana and Nisargadatta, Ramana's preferred mode of teaching was to keep quiet. He said, "This is my highest and primary method of instruction." He said, to be quiet in the presence of a jnani is to experience something of the self, which is the real state and nature of that jnani. He said, "If you want to talk to me, I'll answer your questions, but this is an inferior method of instruction so far as I'm concerned. The true method of instruction for me is I sit here abiding in the self, you sit there, you keep your mind quiet, and if you can keep your attention focused on me or the self, then you will begin to experience to some small extent what I'm experiencing all the time. All you have to do is sit here and be quiet." Now, Nisargadatta was a little bit more traditional. He liked people to argue with him. He was a very animated, feisty character. He was street smart. He ran a business in Bombay. He knew he was a ferocious bargainer when it came to buying things. He didn't like people who wasted money. Just very much the city, not sophisticated, but street smart. Do you know what I mean by street smart? Like he knew how to survive in a poor part of a big third world city. He had that kind of ability. And his method of instruction was, for a long, long time, the very traditional one in which the Guru tells you, you are the self, you are consciousness, and by sheer force of his experience, the power inherent in his words, he would try to make you experience that state by repeatedly telling you that you're in that state and what that state was like. I think this was so for particularly the last year or so of his life. He didn't really interact much. Every morning you'd sit there and in a very roundabout way he'd just talk about consciousness, what it was, where it came from, how it manifested. And you'd sit there and sometimes you'd think, I heard this story 6 times already this week. Why is he telling this for the 7th time this week? And at other times you'd sit there absolutely transfixed and you'd suddenly realize that he was actually describing the state you were in at that moment. Somehow the power of those words had bypassed your mind. They activated that place, that center in you, which was consciousness. And as he gave you the description of what it was, how it manifested, you could just sit there realizing he was giving you a running commentary on your own state in that moment. That particular understanding, I think he called getting the knowledge. It wasn't enlightenment, it wasn't realization, but somehow he could push you into that space, that place of temporarily being consciousness by the power of his presence, by the power of his words. And so long as he was there, full of that energy, full of that determination to convince you of who or what you were. You could stay in that place. This getting the knowledge was his phrase. He often said, okay, you've got the knowledge, now you understand, you can go. Because it was a very small room. People were always coming, and the people who'd been there the longest had to leave to make way for the people who were coming in. In the last visit I paid to him, he was trying to talk to someone who was sitting behind me, and I'm quite big, you can probably spot this, and he couldn't see the person behind me, and he got irritated with me. He said, "You're taking up too much space on my floor. You've already got the knowledge. You've got so much knowledge, it's coming out of your ears and making a mess on my floor. You go away and make space for somebody else who hasn't got it." So I took that as a kind of blessing, benediction, and I left and I never came back. He wasn't saying, I was enlightened or anything. He just said, you've understood, you've had this experience, you've been in that place of abiding and being, you know what I'm talking about. In another conversation I had, he confirmed that what he was trying to do was activate the consciousness inside you by the power of his words. He liked people to argue with him, not, I think, because he wanted to convince you that what he was saying was right. I think there was something about the exchange when you were airing your opinions, your views, or trying to justify your opinions, your concepts. He would react in the normal argumentative way and try to convince you otherwise. But while this was going on, he would be emanating a force, a power, an energy of Shakti, which would actually show you what you really were and make you understand that all the ideas that you were formulating in your mind were just concepts, and they didn't really have any validity or any relationship to this underlying consciousness, which is what you really were. So he liked to have a good argument with people, simply because it gave him an opportunity to give you a choice of being aware and accepting this inherent consciousness that was in you, or getting stuck in your mind and letting your thoughts and ideas run away with you. So on this particular occasion, we had a mock argument. I mean, I wasn't disagreeing with him. He liked people to argue with him. He liked people to quarrel with him. So if he didn't like sitting quietly like Bhagavan. He liked people to talk. He liked people to engage with him. So he'd say, "Come on, somebody ask me a question. Who's got any doubts? If you didn't have doubts, you wouldn't be sitting on this floor. Somebody talk to me. Somebody argue with me." He was inviting quarrels all the time. So if nobody had any business, just to keep the ball rolling, just to keep things going, one or other of us would just start a conversation and try and defend some logical point of view and wait for him to attack you back in return. So on this particular occasion, just out of fun, I was saying, yesterday you said this, the day before you said that, this morning you said that. They can't all be true. What you're saying is completely contradictory. Just to see what he would say. And for a while he attempted to rationalize all the completely different paradoxical things he kept saying to people, and just to keep the dialogue going I kept saying, but last week you said this, and then you said this, and that, if you said that, this can't be true. And finally he just got tired of all this, and he said, "David, you're completely misunderstanding the point of my dialogues, my conversations." He said, "I'm not giving you these words, these teachings, so that you can go away and think about them and make a philosophy that's rational, coherent, and free of contradictions. When I speak, I am planting my words inside you, in your consciousness. Those words, they will grow, They will flower, they will bear fruit in their own time, but only if you don't think about them. He said the whole point of my teachings is to take delivery of them in a place where you don't think about them, you don't consider them, you don't argue with me about them, you just let them settle inside you, and there's a power in those words, and at the right moment, if you leave them alone and not study or argue with those words will reveal the truth to you. So this going back to the difference between him and Bhagavan, that's a very traditional but different way to Bhagavan. He wanted to implant something inside you. He would transmit his power to you by the power inherent in his words. He would make a classic proclamation, your Brahman, yourself, your consciousness. And he wasn't asking you to do anything about it. He wasn't asking you to practice being consciousness, to think about whether it was true or not, whether you were consciousness. He was simply putting that truth inside you through the force of his own experience. And he said, if you take delivery of that truth in the right place, and if you don't think about it, don't consider it, don't argue about it, then those words will actually manifest as the experience itself.